Hello and welcome to Tips for Tackling the Test for SkillsFirst. The basics. The SkillsFirst test is split into a non-calculator and a calculator section. The non-calculator section is 15 marks and has been allocated 30 minutes. The calculator section is 45 marks and has been allocated 1 hour and 30 minutes. You'll be given the non-calculator section first, and you'll only be allowed to move on to the calculator section once you're finished. You need to make sure you've got all of the answers you can in for the non-calculator section before you move on. Before you start, we recommend you have attempted a mock test, and also that you've had a go with something called the Maths Functionality tool. This will teach you how to use all of the different graph making tools that may appear in the test, plus some extra things like building nets, using a ruler and a protractor. Now we're going to talk about working out in the calculator. For every question, you'll be given a box in the top right hand corner to write in your work. This box will be marked, so make sure you write in what calculations you have done to get to your answer, especially if it's a question that's worth more than 1 mark. I would recommend putting little notes for yourself as you work so that you remember what each number means. So for example, here I've done 87 multiplied by 54 is 4,698. And then I've made a note underneath that number means the number of people in the cinema. These notes will be useful to you if you ever need to come back or you ever want to look through your working, and it will also be useful to the examiners to understand why you've done those calculations and what the rationale is behind it. The other important thing is to not forget about units. Some questions will give you the units, but some questions won't, so make sure you do not forget to add units to your answer. In the second half of the test, you'll be given a calculator to work with, and it'll look like this one on the screen. Whenever you press equals, this calculator will add the calculation you just did to the workings box in the top right hand corner. Now that's really useful because it means that instead of having to type stuff into the calculator and then type stuff into the working box, it will do it for you. It'll keep a record of all the calculations that you've done so that you don't have to copy it twice. Again, during the calculator section, I would recommend putting little notes so that you can understand where each of the calculations comes from. Because otherwise, especially in the larger mark calculations, you get lost in your working and forget what each calculation was meant to do. There's 2 strange symbols on the calculator that you may or may not have seen. This little star symbol means times and the slash means divide. If you can, try to leave the number you're working on the calculator so that you don't get rounding errors. Don't forget, if you do take the number off the calculator, it should still be in your working out box as long as you pressed equals. Drawing graphs. A lot of the information you'll need about drawing graphs is on the Maths Functionality tool, but there's a few things that I think we should go over. The number one most important one is don't forget when you're drawing graphs, you need to label your axes, your data, and you need to give it a title. This is a really important step, not just because it makes the graph more readable and easy to plot, but because you get marks for it. Before you start, you need to decide what your axes go up in and across by. Label everything before you start plotting points or drawing bars. Be careful with the paper. In the explainer video on choosing a chart and a scale, I said that your paper would have 10 squares in a big square, but sometimes in this paper they may give you big squares with only 5 small squares inside. The method here is very, very similar, I would say. For example, if you made one of these squares 10, then each small square would be worth 2. Again, it's still nice and easy to count up in 2s, and if you want 1, you just get halfway between. If you've drawn something in the wrong place, don't forget you can select it using the select tool down the side. All of the graphs have this setting thing on the right side, so you can choose between what you're plotting. At the bottom it will say select. You can click stuff to select it and drag it around the screen. Some things will have a little selector on either end, so you can drag either end. And also you can delete it by selecting it and then clicking delete selected. When you're adding tallies to the tally chart, note that when you have 4 and you add 1 more to it, it becomes 5. The proper tallied 5 with a line diagonally across it. Don't forget to add them up when you're finished tallying. The other thing about the way that they draw pie charts is that they give you certain slices of the pie to start with. Don't forget, when you start drawing a pie chart, to work out how many degrees each slice of the pie is worth. For example, if your pie is sliced into 20 slices, then you need to do 360 divided by 20 to find that there's 18 degrees per slice.